Right now in Britain, a pub closes roughly every 12 hours. Not struggling, not on the edge. Closed. Shutters down for good. In the first 3 months of 2026 alone, 161 pubs shut across England, Scotland and Wales. That's almost 2 every single day and 26% more than the same period the year before. Those closures cost around 2,400 jobs, half of them held by workers under 25. Here's the part that should genuinely stop you. The industry's own trade body says most of these pubs weren't failing. They were busy, trading well, full on a Friday night, and they still couldn't survive the maths behind the bar. So by the end of this video, you'll understand exactly where the money from your pint actually goes, why a genuinely busy pub can still lose money every month, and why Britain has lost nearly 2,200 pubs in just the last 5 years, right, with no sign of it slowing down. A pub looks like it sells one thing, drinks. In reality, it's running 2 or 3 different businesses stacked on top of each other, and the margin on each one is completely different. Wet trade, beer, spirits, wine, is the traditional heart of the business, but it's also the most heavily taxed product category in British retail. Roughly £1 in every 3 you spend on a pint currently goes straight to tax, before the pub has covered rent, staff, or a single other bill. Food, the modern gastropub model, typically carries a better margin than drinks, which is exactly why so many pubs have leaned into becoming part restaurant over the last 2 decades. But food also means a kitchen, chefs, food safety compliance, and wastage risk that a wet-only pub never has to deal with. The building itself, many pubs don't even own their premises. They're tied to a pub company or brewery, paying rent and often required to buy beer through that same company at a price they don't control. An arrangement the industry calls the tie, and one that's been the subject of government reform for over a decade because of how little bargaining power it leaves the landlord holding. 3 different businesses, 3 different risk profiles, 1 till. Here's the number that explains almost everything in this video. Average pub operating margins have fallen from 12 to 15% before the pandemic to around 4% today. Think about what that means in practice. A pub doing brisk trade, seemingly thriving, full most nights, can still be operating on a margin so thin that a single bad month, 1 broken piece of kitchen equipment, or 1 delayed supplier payment can tip it into loss. Where did that margin go? Layer these on top of each other, because in 2026 they've mostly landed at once. Alcohol duty rose 3.66% in February 2026, in line with inflation. Employer national insurance contributions increased. The national living wage rose sharply, and food and drink input costs climbed more than 30% between 2021 and 2024 alone, with energy prices still running around 70% above pre-pandemic levels even after easing from their peak. Individually, a pub could probably absorb any one of these. The problem, according to the industry's own trade body, is that the November 2025 budget alone added an estimated £322 million in extra costs across pubs and brewers nationally, landing on top of everything else in the same 12-month window. Here's what almost no customer standing at the bar ever thinks about. The tax and cost structure behind a pint doesn't scale the way you'd expect. Take alcohol duty. It's charged per litre of pure alcohol at the wholesale level. Currently £19.45 per litre for a typical draft pint under the reduced draft rate, against a higher £22.58 main rate for most other alcohol. That's before VAT, before business rates, before wages. It's baked into the cost of the product before the pub has even opened its doors that day. Then there's business rates, and this is where the mechanism gets genuinely unfair, according to the sector itself. Pub rateable values are calculated largely on turnover, not profitability. That means a pub doing strong, busy trade, exactly the kind of pub you'd assume is financially healthy, can be hit with a bigger rates bill precisely because it's popular, even while its actual profit margin sits at a wafer-thin 4%. The system taxes the appearance of success, not the reality of it. The government did introduce a 15% business rates relief for pubs from April 2026, alongside a 2-year freeze on the rates multiplier. But industry analysis has pointed out a blunt mathematical problem. The relief replaced a previous 40% discount, meaning for many pubs the support is actually a net cut in relief, not an increase in it. Put simply, a pub can be genuinely popular, genuinely well run, and still be taxed and cost squeezed into the red. Because almost none of the cost structure sitting behind the bar is connected to whether the business is actually profitable, the closures aren't evenly spread and they're not random. Scotland has taken the heaviest hit of any UK nation, with 41 closures in the first quarter of 2026 alone. Wales, by contrast, was the only region to report a net increase in pub numbers over the same period. A reminder that this isn't one single national story, but dozens of local ones playing out differently depending on regional costs, tourism, and local economic conditions. Nationally, the number of pubs in Britain has fallen from 46,829 in 2020 to 44,656 in 2025. Nearly 2,200 gone in 5 years. And accommodation and food services, the sector pubs sit inside, has recorded the highest company insolvency rate of any sector in the UK every single year since 2015. A decade-long pattern that shows just how little buffer this industry has ever had, long before 2026's specific cost pressures arrived. The British Beer and Pub Association's own chief executive put it bluntly: the scale of these closures is avoidable because the pubs closing are often doing brisk trade. Their profits are simply being wiped out by tax and cost burden before they ever reach the owner. That's a genuinely unusual thing to hear from an industry body. It's not demand collapsed, it's the business worked and the numbers still didn't. There has been real government intervention here, and it's worth being fair about what's actually on the table. From April 2026, pubs received a 15% reduction in business rates bills, followed by a 2-year real terms freeze on the multiplier. The government also extended World Cup opening hours, increased the Hospitality Support Fund to £10 million, and has pointed to cuts in draft alcohol duty and corporation tax caps as further support. But the sector's own voice has been consistent and blunt in response. UK Hospitality's chair has said the trade is now carrying the highest tax burden in the economy. The BBPA has directly said operators feel the relief is being swallowed whole by other budget measures introduced at the same time: the national insurance rise, the wage increases, and the rates revaluation all landing together. Their ask hasn't changed: permanent structural business rates reform and a cut to beer duty and VAT specifically, not temporary relief that gets partly clawed back by cost increases introduced in the same package. With margins already at a historic low and consumer confidence still fragile, industry voices have specifically warned that unless something more structural changes before the autumn, the closure rate is expected to accelerate, not slow down, as the colder months arrive and heating costs rise on top of everything else. Scenario 1. A traditional wet-led local pub tied to a pub company. Revenue depends almost entirely on drink sales, taxed at the source before a single other cost is covered, with average sector margins at 4%, and this year's budget measures adding an estimated £322 million in costs across the industry. A tied pub has the least room to absorb a shock. It can't renegotiate its beer supply price, and its rates bill is calculated on turnover it's actively trying to grow. This is the profile the BBPA's numbers suggest is most exposed to closure. Scenario 2, a freehouse gastropub with a strong food offering, higher margin food sales help offset the drink side tax burden, and owning or independently leasing the building, rather than being tied, gives more control over supply costs. But this model carries its own exposure. A bigger kitchen means bigger energy bills in a market where prices remain around 70% above pre-pandemic levels, and a fuller food menu means more staff, landing at exactly the moment employer national insurance and the national living wage have both risen sharply. A pub can be full every Friday night and still be one bad quarter away from a closed sign in the window. And every time that happens, it isn't just a business that disappears. In a lot of British towns, it's the only place left where a whole street still knows each other's names.